And welcome back, visitors to the Paper Prison. It is I, your host, the Comics Prisoner, sentenced for crimes against comics illustration to be forever imprisoned in beautiful pieces of comic art and to sing its praises. And today is going to be a great day as we have a very special visitor to this paper prison. A man who is one of the very architects of the page of art I find myself trapped in, as well as a member of what I like to call the Bronze Age Renaissance at Marvel Comics in the last half of the 1970s. He is well known as an inker, but is also an illustrator, painter, and teacher. Truly a Renaissance man. In comics, he has worked for every major publisher, on every mainstream character. His contributions to the medium cannot be overstated. Most resounding is his work in helping midwife one of the greatest Thanos stories in comics with his inks, and by extension, help direct the path of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, and now, please welcome a man who needs no introduction, even though I just gave him a kind of a long one. That grandmaster and old master himself, Joe Rubinstein.
Neither of those sound that good, but sure, whatever you.
Yeah, I like old titles like that.
How about a modern classic?
I like that.
Thank you.
Modern classic.
Like Kill Bill 1 and 2. Okay.
Oh, deep cut. It's becoming a deep cut. It's been a while.
I like
A lot
that.
of cuts in it, that's for sure.
Well, look, as we discussed earlier,
I've never met you before. I don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
we'll catch up.
Okay.
As I told before, this I'm inviting you because I'm doing a series on what I felt was a great time for the Incredible Hulk comic book title, around issues 223 to about 229, and which you worked on. And as we go along, I'll be explaining why I think it was such a great time for the Hulk title. But before we get going, just to give just a little bit of background that I'm interested in. As I recall, you started working for Dick Giordano around age 16, 17, is that correct?
Well, no, I started working at his studio when I was 13 as a gopher.
Oh, wow.
And then at 15, I started to do assistant work like filling in blacks and erasing pages. And I guess by the time I was 16, I was doing backgrounds and secondary figures.
Oh, that's good, because I was going to actually ask us when I thought you were starting at 16, like did you have to submit a portfolio, or was it just through a referral, or
You mean to DC or to Dick?
to Dick?
No, I was a kid. I met Neil Adams at my first comic book convention, and I asked, he was my idol at the time, who knew? And I asked him if I could work in his new studio, and he said, yeah, we need. So I started to work there, making coffee, mopping floors, running errands, usually carrying 50 pounds of comic books to Marvel Comics from 90 East 48th Street to 56th Street, 57th Street. So they're talking 8 blocks in 90-degree high humidity New York City. So just to survive, I had to learn to be an artist so I could get to stay in the room with air conditioning, I think, was my motivation. And then, Dick was great. Dick would stop things and give me little lessons and show me things and explain things, unlike Neil, who couldn't be bothered.
Looking at your career right now, it's kind of hard to get one's arms around it, because you may look at this as early Rubinstein, but you've been working at this point, and really, also I just want to say, while you are highly associated with Marvel, your first work was for DC. Just pointing that out, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, but we're talking about your work and starting with Incredible Hulk 223, and like I said, you'd been working as a professional inker for 2 or 3 years. You'd already made a huge impact with the wrapping up the Thanos and Warlock stories. And
what year was Hulk 223?
That was 78. And
78. So I've been working about 3 years by that point.
Right. So I know from personal experience, someone like you looks back on his earlier works, all he can see is the stuff he's unhappy with. But we still look at it with great fondness.
I would have looked at his work and said, you have potential, but there's stuff you have to learn.
No, I mean you looking at your own work.
Yeah, I'm saying I would have looked at his work,
Uh-huh.
me, and go, yeah, you're okay, but there's stuff you got to learn.
Yeah.
So I would have thought there's real potential there.
I think we all did.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I did the Avengers 2-in-1 annual, which was my first Marvel work, John Beatty, the inker, told me he thought it must have been a phony name in the credits, because why was it this good and he had never heard of me before? Which is very flattering.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. You weren't just a competent professional. You were already generating a strong fan following by 78. So,
I guess.
and as for myself, and this is a question I'm going to hit you with, because when I first saw that, I think that the first couple pages in the issue I had kind of some bad printing. It looked just a little muddy, and the color on the Hulk just was almost chartreuse, not really green. Have you ever looked at some of your work that has been printed and you're really excited about it, and then when it hit the press, it got diminished through bad printing?
Yeah, well, there was a period of time where Marvel decided to economize by, instead of having metal plates, they used plastic plates, and through the process of printing, I guess they would heat up, and some of the thinner lines started to wiggle and drop out, and we referred to them as boogie lines because they were just odd and weird. Yeah, so there was a time there. And I mean, generally speaking, I didn't mind my reproduction, except when Marvel and DC switched to the better paper, then the stuff kind of looked cruder because I anticipated reproduction closing my lines up. And when they were printed open, there was kind of a rawness to them, which I had to compensate for.
Yeah, I think even guys like, say, Vinnie Coletta knew how the ink was going to hit newsprint and actually inked for that way. And
I did.
Cool. Great. All right. So once again, I got to ask you this again. It's just my opinion. You can call it conspiracy theory or whatever, that right around this time, it was a great time to be a Hulk fan. You had the TV show was a legitimate hit. I mean, Marvel had a legitimate hit where they could keep their dignity in the TV or live action space. And then all of a sudden we
except for the Thor episode.
Well, thank God that was years down the way.
Yeah, okay.
So, and then we have again, just my opinion, that they looked at that and said, look, this show is driving a lot of eyes toward the Hulk comic book. We should make this thing look absolutely as good as it can be. I really felt that it was a intended strategy to just say, who do we have that's really great, who's available, and just make this be a showpiece. Did you get any feel from that, from higher up, from management, that was the case?
No, I don't even remember who my editor was, but I suppose you could ask them if they're still alive. But I can't imagine any book not wanting to be the very best it can be. Now, understandably, I think Gene Colan got on the Hulk magazine not because they asked him, but because he asked them. Because it was a hit, and it's sort of safe to be on a product like that. But an editor, they call around and they look for a penciler, and they look for a writer, they look for an inker. And let's say they call up Tom Palmer and he's busy, and they call up Klaus Janson and he's busy, and they call up Dick Giordano and he's busy, and they call me up and they go, oh, I'm available. So, I mean, I think everybody starts with who they think is the best for the job. Now, certainly, if it were today and somebody offered me the X-Men, I do it because I know it's like the best-selling book in the world, and there's a certain prestige to it. But in those days, I got the Hulk job. I could see that Sal was a very fine, solid, good comic book artist. And like anything else, I just wanted to do it the best I could do. One, because since you spent the majority of your life alone in a room, you'd like to have something to be proud of when it's all done. And two, you'd like to get hired again. So I didn't I didn't work harder on the Hulk because it was a TV show, but I think everybody, until you become a hack, I guess, or just the realities of deadline, always try to do their best work.
Right. It just in that like 6 month period, except for Joe Sinnott's, it just seemed like also it seemed like it was the Young Turks showing off, and a lot of them, quite frankly, all of them except for maybe Bob McLeod, came out of the Dick Giordano's studio in one way or another, which was
well, Bob came out of Neil's studio because he used to come and visit and work there, but he wasn't directly influenced by Dick. He was influenced by Neil.
Gotcha. And it's just, again, just my opinion that I just feel like when Neil came onto the scene, that he was just so powerful and made such an impact that it was almost like the house style of comics became photorealism. It'd be very difficult to do like a whimsical Steve Ditko thing around the 70s, or a very expressive Kirby thing. And also, the audience was aging up a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't deny that Mike Netzer was getting work.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line, Tom Grinberg showed up and Bill Sienkiewicz showed up, Bob McLeod, all very heavily influenced by Neil. But also around this time, aren't we getting Kaluta and Wrightson and Chaikin and Starlin and Ron Wilson and Perez? And all those people are really hitting their stride. So I do believe that generally DC was lagging in trying to get a more modern look to it. Now, I could look at the stuff and be proven completely wrong, but it seems to me that they were still into the Kurt Swan, Irv Novick people. They'd gotten rid of Dick Dillon. I think Dick Dillon had died by that point. But I think it was Marvel who was playing around more with the styles, and where you always think Marvel has a house look, Byrne was certainly in there, and John Buscema. Over at DC, I think they were trying out new people like maybe Miller. They had a books over there called Weird War Stories and House of Mystery, House of Secrets, and they kind of used them as a training ground where they would give new people like Miller a 6-pager, Simonson a 6-pager, to see how they would do. And to my surprise, by the way, if you ask me what the Marvel style is, I say Jack Kirby, John Buscema, Joe Sinnott. That's Marvel to me. Mm-hmm. But to my surprise, people said to me that during the 80s, the Marvel look was me and McLeod and Austin. And where Austin is not like the other two, I'm kind of like Klaus. But apparently because we were getting so much work, that became the Marvel look, to my surprise.
I hear you. I have a little saying I say here. I want to bounce it off you and see what you think of the supposition. My saying is, the comics business is a commercial art industry that has to employ fine artists. What do you think of that?
Well, I probably have a different view of what fine artists are than you have. Mm-hmm. I think when somebody like Disney employs background people or storyboard people, I think they very much care about the product. I think they work as hard as they can. I think certainly one of my teachers, a guy named Nathan Folks, was a background artist for Disney on Shrek and Blue Sky and all those people. And he comes from a fine arts background, but I think when you sit down to produce a product for somebody else, it ain't fine arts. But again, I'm sure Gil Kane loved being a comic book artist. I'm sure Starlin loved being a comic book artist, Wrightson. And you do the best you can do. And to me, fine arts is, I'm not doing it for anybody but me. I'm doing it because I feel like it, and I'm making the statement that I feel, or non-statement that I feel like. And those guys, they need to make a statement, and there's a predisposition to a purpose. This is why we're doing it. I may start a piece of artwork not knowing the least why I'm doing it, other than I feel like doing a watercolor tonight.
Right. So. Okay. So I know this is kind of a really large question to ask, but how was it? You said that this was the first time you worked over Sal Buscema. How was it working over Sal for the first time?
Well, it was easy, actually. I mean, because Sal has a very clean, definitive line. There's nothing ambiguous about it. Sal, for some reason, drew in blue pencil instead of gray graphite pencil. I said this to Dick Giordano, and Dick Giordano and other people have said it to me. Gee, it must be hard working on blue pencils. And the answer is no. You don't even notice after a while. What I needed to do, which I was lacking in, was I needed to add more drama in the sense of Black's graphics and things like that. My concentration, because I do come from a life drawing fine arts background, is I just wanted to draw all the elements as well as I could. I wanted to get Hulk's musculature right. I wanted to get the hair right and the girls pretty and all that stuff. But I think the weakest thing I did was I didn't make it graphic and black and white enough to truly tell the story. And today, if somebody gave me a layout job, that would be my real first priority over the drawing. But working on Sal is easy. It's certainly easier than working on John Buscema, because John was sketchier and gave you an awful lot more things to consider. Or like when I inked the Wolverine miniseries with Miller, those were layouts too. And there was a lot of sketchiness that I had to pull together, but Frank knew that's what he was giving me, layouts. When he gave Jansen pencils on Daredevil at the same time period, that's why Daredevil and Wolverine look so different from each other, because Frank gave pencils to him and layouts to me. So,
Right. Well, for those of you out there that have visited the Comics Prisoner before, you know that my thing is that I'm for my transgressions against comics illustration, I am confined to beautiful pieces of comic art to sing their praises. And today we are confined in a page from, I believe, 224 that Mr. Rubinstein inked over Sal Buscema. And I know you've looked at it earlier, Joe, but I know, I mean, we could spend like a long time talking about line weights and rendering, but the thing from historical perspective, I'm just looking at the two usages of Zipatone you used here. You know, kind of a lost resource. And while I like the linear use of zip in the bottom panel, I always love how white Zipatone can really lend us something when you're looking through the glass that the Hulk is smashing, and the leader's head is on the other side. So you put on the white zip to show that you're like looking through.
Right. But you know, we even had to make compromises on that stuff. Zipatone stopped being used because we were told not to do it anymore. They were told that in the printing process it made mores, which is like an overlapping vibration. And my attitude was, so what's wrong with them? Why can't? So I like a nice moire. But the thing is, white Zipatone, the dots aren't that opaque. So after you would Zipatone a particular section, you would have to go and make a Xerox. And then the dots were very white. And then you would have to paste that Xerox over the artwork so that it would actually be produced correctly. Nowadays, with computers, hopefully you tell the colorist, fade that out for me. And the thing about Zipatone is, sometimes there were wonderful colorists like Tajana Wood or Glynis Ween, but a lot of them sucked. And I worked so hard to get a lighting right on somebody's face, and the colorists didn't know what they were doing, and they would just slap color right across the whole thing. So what I did was I put down Zipatone as often as possible to model the form, to push an area back, to push the glass back, to direct the eye from dark to light, all sorts of things. So that was my way of trying to ensure that the job at least had some semblance of my concept to it. But as I say, nowadays, I had like 6 issues of the Fantastic Four colored by Paul Mounts, and they were gorgeous. And it's like $200 million Disney animated movies. So I mean, sure, there are screw ups everywhere, but if you get the right colorist, they're almost as much as an artist today as the penciler or the inker is.
Well, as we're starting to come to a close, and I know these are some very big questions I'm asking for you like to quantify into like a sound bite, but is there anything you'd like to say after looking at this job some 40 years later, or is it just
the kid's got potential?
Oh God. You know, I'm so glad that you were able to do 3 issues in a row. Clearly something happened, you got pulled away, And
I got bored. I easily get bored. I just went, okay, I've done this, and I've done, and possibly I was offered a John Buscema or Gene Colan or somebody else. I went, all right, I've done 3 issues of Sal. I'm good. So
well, again, I thought you and your compatriots' entry helped make the experience of being a Hulk fan combined with the TV show just the best time to be a Hulk fan. And also Roger Stern's story, which is also
great.
just as memorable as your art and the artists of
Right.
the other. It was just a time when this title was really on on all cylinders. It's clicking on all
Okay.
cylinders.
I agree.
So anyway, well, I see visiting hours are closing here at the Paper Prison. So before we have to go, where can they find you online if they want to do
I
any?
am on Instagram and I am on Facebook, but I also have a website, which is Joe Rubinstein art.com. Rubinstein, RUBINSTEIN art.com, where you can find me for all kinds of art purposes.
Great, Joe. We're going to put that link in the video description so people don't have to transcribe anything. They can just hit the links. And, well, looks like the clock on the wall is telling us the end is near. I'm just going to leave this page here for you to consume and enjoy and experience the greatness of it for yourself. We hope you'll come back again, Joe. And the warden is reminding me again that if you've liked what you've seen here, feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell. It helps the channel, helps maybe grow an audience and a community. I hope we'll talk a lot in the comment section and on the Facebook page. And until next time, please remember, 4 walls do not a prison make, but comics can make a very cool prison. Take care now.